The case of JonBenet Ramsey's death is one of the most well-known cases in true crime in the United States and maybe even around the world. If you ask anyone about the case, they probably would be able to give you one or two details at the very least on it. The young beauty queen's death has multiple odd components to it that have caused it to remain an unsolved mystery all these years later, and one case that many people wish would become solved within our lifetimes. In Mexico, there is a case very similar to JonBenet Ramsey's, that it has been nicknamed Mexico's JonBenet Ramsey case. A case of a young disabled girl who went missing, only to be found unalive wedged between her bed mattress and the frame days later. The suspects are endless, parents are suspicious, and the case technically remains unsolved. Hey, I'm Serenity and this is my channel, and today we're joined by Ginger, Scarlett, and Clover is down here. Today's case I am doing is the first time I've ever done a case translated from Spanish. I've worked with English and Spanish articles together, but this is the time I translated most of it from Spanish. So please give me grace. I did my best I could with my resources, but my Spanish is not 100% perfect. So if I get anything wrong, please kind of let me know down below. I didn't mean to. This case is one that has haunted me for years. I think it's haunted a lot of people in the world, especially Mexico. It's very eerie. It is not an easy case to talk about because we are talking a 4-year-old girl and a disabled child at that, and how her case, I don't think anyone thinks actually got justice. So before we begin, I do want to give trigger warnings for the following: mentions of possible murder, suffocation, and possible child neglect. Again, we're talking about a young child. If any of these topics you believe you'd be unable to handle, please stop watching, put yourself first, and I'll see you at a later date with a different video. If I get any information wrong, please kindly let me know down below. I have multiple sources, but if only one source mentioned one detail and I couldn't verify it using another source, I went with the most commonly reported aspect of that detail. Sources are linked down below, but also please do your own research if you want. Also, all of this information is translated, so things can get lost in translation. Lastly, this video is an informational entertainment research study that I'm sharing for academic reasons only. I mean absolutely no harm to anyone, especially the victim and the victim's family. So grab a snack, a blanket, a drink, and let's get into this case. Paulette Gerbara Farrah was a 4-year-old little girl living in Huixquilucan de Degollado. It's Multiplicity, an area outside of Mexico City in Mexico, about 50 minutes away from the center of Mexico City. So like kind of like a suburb of Mexico City. Her family had money, and that is very important to this case. Her father Mauricio worked as a businessman, and her mother Lizette Farrah was a lawyer. Now sometimes I'm going to say their names the English way, sometimes I'll say them with the Spanish accent. It's just easier as someone with dyslexia. So Paulette also had an older sister who was also named Lizette, and she was 7 years old. The little girl shared a name with their mom. Paulette did live with developmental disabilities that made her unable to speak, and she did need help walking. It affected the left side of her body. We don't know the exact diagnosis of what condition she had. We do know that she was born with it. So for these reasons, and because the family could afford help, the little girl had 2 live-in nannies who looked after her on a daily basis, Erica and Martha Casimiro. On the evening of March 21st, 2010, Paulette was home along with her sister as her dad returned home from a business trip to Valle de Bravo. The family had just actually returned from a 3-day vacation to Los Cobos the week before. The girl's mom actually put the girls to bed that night before retiring to her bedroom alone. The following morning, on March 22nd, 2010, Erica, one of the nannies, entered the little girl's room to wake her from her slumber. It was time to start her day. However, Paulette was not there, nor was she anywhere in her bedroom. Erica started to freak out, searching her room, searching everywhere for the little girl. Erica then went to retrieve Lizette, Paulette's mother, and the pair began searching the apartment. The apartment was huge. It's this massive place. They looked everywhere for Paulette, and when they couldn't locate her in the apartment, they started searching the apartment building. They also couldn't locate Paulette anywhere in the apartment building. Meanwhile, Mauricio called his sister to tell her that Paulette was missing, and the sister then was on police to get them involved in the child's disappearance. As I said though, the family was really wealthy, and they knew people in high places. One of those people being the mayor, and he would then call the State of Mexico Attorney General, Alberto Vaz. Everyone was trying to locate Paulette at this point. The Farrah family had exhausted the search in their apartment building, and that is when they claimed they could not locate Paulette anywhere where she could be. The whole situation though was odd. Nothing was out of place in their home, and everything was exactly as they had placed it the night before. Not a single item was amiss in Paulette's room. Her bed looked like it normally would in the morning, how she would wake up in the morning. before she started her day. There was absolutely no sign of a kidnapping at all or theft that had occurred in the apartment. And I mean absolutely nothing was amiss. The front doors were locked, and all the windows and doors that were normally locked closed were locked. The apartment building did have several surveillance cameras going at all times, but nothing on the recorded video showed any sort of oddity that Paulette had left her home, either willingly or not. Now keep in mind, this was a child who could not speak verbally, and she did rely on the people around her to help her. There's no way it could have been possible for her to leave her room, much less her own apartment, completely on her own. Paulette lived with motor and language disabilities, so everyone around her was perplexed as to what happened in the middle of the night. Police were called, an intensive search began, and it was launched with a volunteer effort of sniffing dogs, and helicopters became involved with the search. That same afternoon of the 22nd, Alberto, the Attorney General, released a missing photo poster picturing Paulette, along with information on her age, appearance, and physical disabilities. So I actually found a banner of this poster that was hung across what seems to be like an overpass of a highway, revealing it to the public. That was released to the public. And I want to translate it for you just so you can see how dire the situation was and understand that. So the sign, of course, is in Spanish, but here's the translation. Help me get back to my home. My name is Paulette. I am 4 years old. I have a language and motor disability. I have a scar on my back on the left side, and I cannot take care of myself. I need my parents. At the bottom of this sign, there was a number to contact with the information, along with the message that calling this number was toll-free, which is important. The sign alone is pretty heartbreaking to me because it's pretty obvious the people around Paulette loved her, and they were just very desperate to locate her. And just knowing how she's going to be discovered is extremely saddening. Paulette's maternal aunt named Farrah sent multiple emails to people she knew and uploaded photos of Paulette to her social media, just trying to get the news of her niece's disappearance out there so it would spread to people that could help aid in their search. There was such a large response to the case to these efforts that the same evening, in Paulette's room on Paulette's bed, Lizette, through a local news station, released a statement addressing her daughter's disappearance, alleging to the abductor, asking that Paulette to be returned safely to them. It did not have to be back to their home. The kidnapper could leave Paulette in a local shopping center or another crowded place so they wouldn't be caught. As long as she was safe, Lizette said she did not care how her daughter was returned, and there would be no criminal charges pressed against them. The family did not stop. They kept their momentum going. They were looking for Paulette. They wasted no time in rest, and nor did they want to. Lizette immediately went from this statement to handing out flyers with Paulette's photo on them. They put up billboards around the city, and they had ads with their daughter's missing persons poster placed on local television statements, along with public transportation. So I keep saying the family had money, and they spared no monetary expense to get the word out about their daughter's disappearance. They wanted to make sure that everyone in the vicinity knew that Paulette was missing and to be on the lookout for her. Paulette's father, Mauricio, also did his own rounds in the media, pleading to the police to help his daughter to be returned to them safely. In his interviews, he told the media that on the morning of March 22nd, he left for work early, so he actually didn't see anyone else in his house that was awake at the time, if anyone was. So the last time he saw his daughter would be the night before. And by the time he left in the morning, Paulette seemingly would have already been gone. All of Mexico City and the country of Mexico was up in arms about this case. They were searching for Paulette. No one who was in the area was not looking for this child. But just 7 days later, on March 29th of 2010, the Attorney General announced to the public that Paulette's parents and her 2 live-in nannies, Erica and Martha, would be placed under a restriction order. So basically like house arrest, but outside of their house, due to their statements that they gave the police having inconsistencies. So not everyone had the same story. And they, at this point, were kind of pointing fingers at each other, and there was multiple falsehoods. This means that the 4 adults living in the apartment where Paulette disappeared from were now being looked into. Attorney General Alberto gave the following statement to the media, and I quote, "Each one of them at a certain moment has falsified their statements, which has made it difficult to know the truth of the facts and to clarify a firm line of investigation." So we're actually going to be discussing what he means by this later, but right now I want to lay out all the details of the case before I present the theories and inconsistencies in the investigation, because it does move very quickly, and because it moves very quickly, that is why there is so much doubt that this was quote-unquote solved. On March 30th of 2010, following day, Paulette's parents were interrogated for several hours at the police station before being taken to a local hotel in order to comply with the new restriction placed on them. While they were out of the apartment, police experts had placed blankets at the Gebara Farrah home preparing for a reconstruction of events. So they were taking like comforters to reconstruct the crime scene, the missing scene where Paulette disappeared from. In the early hours of March 31st, 2010 at approximately 2 a.m., investigators were searching the apartment again and they found her. They found Paulette. It was great news, right? They located the child. But that wasn't the truth. Paulette's body was found in her own bedroom, the very place she had gone missing from. Now, how she was found, there is a video of this and it's linked down below. I debated linking it, but it is because it's extremely disturbing. We'll talk about the video later, but Paulette was found between her bed mattress and her bed frame. So this obviously is the head of my bed and this is the foot of my bed. But for this explanation, we're going to pretend that is the foot of the bed. Between the bed and the wall, there's about 3-4 inches in my bed. She was found between the bed mattress and the frame of her bed, wedged between it on her side. You know, when you go to bed at night, you can lay on your left or right side. She was found on the left side, laying on her left side, wedged between the bed. It's extremely disturbing to think about and to see. Just, it's a kid, it's all together. Later on, there would be a leaked video, one where the investigators can be overheard saying, and I quote, "She was severely beaten," while examining the young girl's stained with blood bed sheets. But as soon as the video was leaked, it was refuted by the Attorney General. Paulette's body was taken from her home where she was found to the coroner's office for an autopsy. And that autopsy would reveal that the 4-year-old child died accidentally due to, and I quote, "mechanical asphyxia due to obstruction of the nasal cavities and thorax abdominal compression." So she couldn't breathe in through her tummy. The autopsy also revealed that Paulette fell asleep on the night of March 21st, 2010 with an orthopedic cloth over her mouth to prevent the young girl from sleeping with her mouth open. Now here's the thing. This is one of the first inconsistencies in this case. When I read the term orthopedic cloth, I thought Paulette was sleeping with mouth tape, which is not very common. I don't think it was very common back then. It's still kind of uncommon today, but it is a sticky adhesive tape that you put over your mouth at night so you don't drool. Some people also wear it so bugs don't get into their mouth at night. But then I looked into what they meant by orthopedic cloth, and from what I could gather, you know when you get a cast for a broken bone and they put that like sock material to protect your skin from the cast padding, or the gauze you get, just medical gauze, that's what they meant. The medical tape, the medical gauze, the medical sock you get at the medical store, not mouth tape. It was not something to cover her mouth that people do. It's not mouth tape. It was orthopedic tape, orthopedic gauze. This is so odd to me, and I think to everyone, because first, Paulette cannot speak. She's not necessarily nonverbal, but because of her disability, she has trouble speaking. So we don't even know if she was able to produce sounds. But even if she could, by covering her mouth at night, when anything can happen, I mean, how many times do kids fall off their bed? How would she be able to yelp for help? Also, her bed was big. It was like a queen-size bed. It is not a bed that you see a normal 4-year-old toddler sleeping in. It was also kind of far off the floor. I'm sitting in front of my bed. I'm 5'6". It was even taller than my bed. So I would say maybe like around here to where my cheekbone is. That's how high her bed was off the floor. The autopsy also revealed, though, that Paulette's body was not manipulated after she passed, and her stomach showed that she had eaten about at least 5 hours before her death, based on the digestive stage her stomach was in. Paulette's body was found with 2 segments of rectangular-shaped adhesive cloth laid in a vertical position on both sides of her cheek, so like this, and it's unclear if this was the orthopedic cloth split in half that was now stuck to her cheeks. Her body also showed signs of a harsh blow to her left elbow and knee, and there was only one slight positive to Paulette's autopsy. There was no signs showing that she had endured any physical or sexual violence, so one can assume if Paulette accidentally rolled off the side of her bed, the blow to her knee and elbow, her descent between the gap of her bed mattress and frame happened on her descent. They were also able to determine a narrow timeline of when they believe Paulette passed, between 5 to 9 days before the autopsy was performed, which was on March 31st. This established the possibility that there was a high chance that Paulette died the first day she went missing. But there was also a possibility she passed 4 days later. Officials never released the official time or date they believe Paulette passed, just a window. The official report also showed that there were no traces of drugs of any type or toxic substances in Paulette's body that would have affected her consciousness. The coroner's official conclusion was Paulette succumbed to her injuries after rolling off the bed by her own means. As she moved off her bed, accidentally falling headlong into the gap between the foot and bed frame, Paulette passed away from asphyxiation and subsequently was left unfound in her bed for 9 days. And now that could be the end of the case. It could be, but it's not. Because even those inconsistencies that we just talked about are the very beginning. We are going to be discussing the odd part of her going unnoticed for that long later, but first let's get into some statements made by people in Paulette's life that alarmed police. The nannies, Erica and Martha, both insisted that Paulette's body could not have been under her mattress in the gap, with Martha telling the police, and I quote, "I looked in the bathroom, under the bed, and in the closet. I saw that she was not there, and I also went into the bedroom of the parents to look for her, to the bedroom of the other girl, Paulette's older sister Lizette. And from there, we started looking for her again. And I went back to look for her in the bedroom." Erica, which is the other nanny, told investigators, and I quote, "In fact, if it had been like that, I think we would have noticed since thousands of people came to look for her. The bed was made. I never saw the mattress pulled back. I did not see the bundle or anything. It does not make any sense to me that the body could have been there since Monday." And they are the ones that do the chores, so their concerns are valid. Paulette's mom had a close friend named Amanda De La Rosa, who actually was living in the apartment for multiple days after Paulette went missing. The very place the child went missing from. Now, it was never technically roped off as a crime scene. There was reporters and investigators and friends and family coming in and out of this house, and that's probably the part that a lot of people think resembles JonBenet Ramsey's case, because it was never closed off. The family was still living there, even days later. And what makes the situation odd is Amanda slept in Paulette's room, in Paulette's bed, a place that authorities did not mark off from being entered. Every day that Amanda was there, the bed was made, and nobody noticed that Paulette was there, nor that her sheets were stained with blood, as it would appear in that forensic video we'll discuss later. When police learned of this, they investigated Amanda as a possible suspect, but charges were never pressed. Now, Amanda is a very interesting character on her own. She was a small-time actress who had only been in one kind of known film in Mexico, and she was the one to leak the details of Paulette's case to the press. Details that when she was found, how she was found, those sort of things that only really family and friends knew at first. And then she would go on to write a book that same year in July called Where's Paulette?, where she would turn on her very close best friend, if you would, Lizette, telling the story of Paulette's disappearance from her own perspective, from a journal she was writing during the investigation, in the very room where Paulette went missing from, questioning the disappearance, questioning the discrepancies between the authority statements and the facts she allegedly saw. Many people brush Amanda De La Rosa off as a social climber, with little regard to what actually happened to Paulette, as long as she could line her pockets with this story and being so close to a juicy case, as she would say, she didn't care. Now today, she brands herself as an activist and artist. But during the investigation, another odd piece of evidence comes to light in the form of a recording between Lizette Farrah and her eldest daughter, 7-year-old Lizette Gerbara Farrah. Now, I know it's a little confusing with the girls having both their mother and father's last name, but also the mother and father not sharing a last name. It's very common in Mexico. In Mexico, many times you do not take your husband's last name, and your kids have both of their last names. That's why a lot of Hispanic people and Latinx people, they have multiple last names, and it's this reason. So it does get a little confusing. But in this recording, the mom can be telling her daughter to not say anything about Paulette's disappearance. That way they could not be blamed for it. Lizette can be heard asking, "Why, Mom?" And the mom replying, "Because otherwise they will blame us for stealing her, or that you took her away to be stolen," basically blaming her child. When the recording came to light, Lizette Farrah denied that the recording was real, claiming that it was edited, so it sounded like she was telling her daughter to lie. However, she would later apologize, stating she accepts that those are the words she said, and told the press, and I quote, "I had the conversation with my daughter, but not in the context they showed it." So let's talk about the night that her body was found. 9 days after she first disappeared at around 2 a.m. in the morning, 3 forensic investigators entered her bedroom, walking to the bed to take measurements for their records. Like I said, it was a really big bed for a 4-year-old. They were recording their conversation on video, kind of like a body cam. And one of the experts can be heard saying twice that Paulette was severely beaten to death. Right before one of the experts moves the bed's comforter aside to reveal that there were 2 large bloodstains dried on the comforter, one being the size of an adult's head. The same man who moved the blanket would then join the 3rd investigator at the front of the bed to remove all the sheets from the mattress. which would actually reveal where Paulette had been this whole time, wedged between the frame and the mattress, partially hidden on one side. Local authorities did give this video to the press to document it as proof of Paulette's body being found, but many people had their doubts about this video being real or staged. Many people claimed it was a reenactment of how it went down and not a real-time recording, based on two main facts: that the trio was even recording the whole thing to begin with, and how one of the experts had to even know that Paulette was beaten with no evidence of blood yet being found at that moment. To netizens, this video was a reenactment, and that would explain how the camera was placed and the position that the forensic experts were in to be able to show the details of their discovery for people on video without it being obstructed by anything. It was a clear shot. They were narrating the whole thing in a monotone voice as they did it, like they were reading from a script or reenacting the words they had said prior that they studied to make sure they got this video right. But even a damner piece of evidence is that a video was being recorded at all, because it wasn't a usual procedure for a video like this to be recorded at night, but rather a legal procedure as such would be recorded during the day when natural light is coming in. However, that wouldn't be the biggest controversy of this video, because as soon as it was released to the public, Attorney General Baza publicly stated that the video proved that Paulette had accidentally died of suffocation, stating that there was no possible violence. The response was so swift that even in later interviews and press statements, possible violence would never be mentioned again, as the official cause of death was ruled an accident. Now, I said I did find this news report and I did watch it, and it is linked down below. And if you watch it, you can see how eerie the whole recording is, but please, please, please be advised that it's very disturbing. I mean, I don't think it never should have aired, but it never at that point should have been available. I was watching the whole thing with my hand covering the screen, just listening to what they were saying, because I don't think we ever should see a child like that or anyone like that. But what I will say, in my own opinion, is watching the clip through, it does feel staged to some extent. I have a third blanket right here. It is if you, the investigator with the camera, and I pull the blanket back to show you like this. When I can't even see it, it would be, this is how it was. The video was filmed. It wasn't looking like this way. There's blood here, guys. It was showing them first, and the comforter was so thick that it wasn't all the way through. You know, sometimes a stain will go all the way through from the top to the bottom. It was only noticeable on the bottom half. It wasn't stained all the way through, so there's no way they could have flipped the comforter up to see if the stain went all the way through. It is very eerie. It does feel staged. On April 3rd, 2010, just a few days after their daughter was found, Lizette filed a amparo proceeding against the restriction order, which an amparo is basically a wit protection order, and she claimed that they had no involvement in her daughter's death, so they shouldn't be under house arrest. Lizette was also examined by professionals who claimed she suffered from some sort of personality disorder during this time that she was subjected to an indictment. The following day, on April 4th, 2010, a judge granted a removal of the restriction order on Paulette's nannies and parents. Everyone was in a separate hotel room. They each had their own room, and they all left at different times. Mauricio left his room at 10:20 a.m., Lizette at 11 a.m., and the nannies Erica and Martha at 12 p.m. Now, they were all under the strict restrictions of not being allowed to leave the country because they still could be asked any additional questions. On April 5th, 2010, Mauricio and Lizette both gave separate interviews, which is where they began to blame each other for their daughter's death. Lizette claimed her husband blamed her for Paulette's death, while Mauricio claimed the death could not have been an accident like they were told, and he did not trust his wife. He told a local TV network the following, and I quote, "The only thing I can say is that for me, it wasn't an accident, and I can only speak for myself." On April 6, 2010, the family would hold Paulette's funeral at the Panteón Francés de San Joaquín Cemetery in Mexico, which is where Paulette's body would be laid to rest for the next couple years. The funeral was a big mess of drama. On Paulette's paternal side, the Gebara family, they did not attend the funeral part at all due to an agreement they made. So the funeral procession was led by Lizette Farrah. Now, this is really interesting because the agreement they made was the Gebara family went to the wake, which is usually the night before you bury someone. You go and you pay your respects and you have loved ones talk, and the next day is when you bury your loved one. Lizette was not allowed to go to the wake, and the Gebara family said, "We're not going to go to the funeral part." And them even coming to that agreement is really, really odd. There had to be such distrust in this family about Paulette's death that both sides of the family couldn't even be present for both parts of it. The following day, on April 7, 2010, Mauricio's family denied Lizette's request to see their other daughter, Lizette, who had been staying with the paternal side since April 4th. This also means that Lizette was not present at her own sister's funeral bearing. Almost a month later, on May 10th, 2010, the Attorney General of the Federal District of Mexico, who also collaborated in the case at the request of her counterpart in the state of Mexico, granted the custody of Paulette Gerbara Farrah, Paulette's sister, to Lizette Farrah, so the mother now had custody, who was actually suing her husband, demanding custody for the eldest child, and they did not want to give that up. This AG is not the same one that the Gebara Farrah family knew personally. It's a totally different one. Over 2 weeks later, on May 26, 2010, Attorney Baz, who was a pivotal part in this investigation, defended the conclusions of the case, actually formally resigned from his position as the Attorney General of the state of Mexico, saying that the Attorney General needs confidence to act efficiently, and that he had lost his confidence due to questioning his own actions in the investigation of the death of Paulette Gerbara Farrah. Now, netizens actually called for the resignation of Attorney Baz due to his botched handling of the case, because initially in the very early days he released a statement claiming that there was no way that this was anything but homicide. But as many days went on, they saw lapse in their AG's judgment, pointing out that there were flaws in their own criminal justice system. During a news conference about the case, he told the press, and I quote, "I recognize that the initial procedures carried out by this agency had deficiencies in not having searched the child's bed and bedroom fully." He did admit that the pressure of solving this case quickly caused speculation and disinformation to spread among the nation. Now, that statement alone makes me feel like the case should have been reopened, because when the official who claimed that all the evidence was true and said right away this is the truth is now claiming almost 2 months later that he lost all confidence in the investigation and his ability to solve it. When the person closest to this case isn't confident enough in it, shouldn't the investigation be reopened? It would be 7 years later, on May 3rd, 2017, when Paulette's body would be exhumed from her resting place in the cemetery, and she would instead be cremated. Authorities no longer classified her remains as objects of evidence of investigations in this case. That was it. The case was closed. But we need to talk about the odd parts in this investigation and the people closest to Paulette, as if the whole ordeal wasn't odd enough. There is an interview from one of the nannies in 2010 stating she believes Paulette's death and discovery of the body was a massive cover-up. They believe Paulette was murdered, and due to the family having friends in very high places, the crime was covered up. But since they were only the help, the poor workers, they were never believed. They cared about this child as if it was their own, and they spent many of the days with the child. And it's also worth noting that both Erica and Martha went on a variety TV show in Mexico to discuss the case, where they actually reenacted how they made Paulette's bed every day and the way they made it every morning that someone was staying there the 9 days after she went missing. Each time they made the bed, they reached under the mattress to tuck the sheets in and the comforter in. They washed the bedding immediately after a guest left the room. They claimed there was no way that Paulette was actually there for 9 days, and there's no way that you wouldn't have smelt her if she wasn't, because bodies decompose, blood smells. It's also worth mentioning that the apartment was huge, like I said, so people staying in the very room that Paulette disappeared from is weird. This place was massive for an apartment. People could have stayed, if there wasn't an extra spare guest bedroom, they could have stayed in the office, they could have stayed in the living room on air mattresses, they could have stayed on the couch. There was really no reason that someone should be staying in the bed that your child disappeared from, is what the nannies were saying. Another odd detail is, remember those interviews I mentioned that Lizette kept giving to local news stations in the beginning? All of them took place in Paulette's bedroom. She was sitting on her missing child's bed at the scene of the crime where her daughter would be found. That was never once roped up until the family was forced to move into a hotel. Now, filming interviews in a missing child's bedroom isn't odd. It happens a lot, but it's odd that there was dozens of people in and out of that room and no one noticed her. No one noticed a smell, no one noticed a blood stain, no one noticed that she was there. That's the odd part. Now, the most popular theory in this case points to Lizette Farrah being responsible. Many Mexican citizens started to believe that she started to become fed up with caring for Paulette, who had disabilities. She kind of saw it as something to be ashamed of to have a child with disabilities. Even with the help of 2 nannies, that Paulette still needed constant care. However, Lizette did refute this, saying in an interview after Paulette was found that she would never consider taking care of her daughter a burden, stating, and I quote, "She was always a fighter." Nobody could believe what that girl had achieved. So let's continue on the talk about Lizette Farrah because she is very suspicious. She did a lot of interviews. And in an interview, after being released from her hotel house arrest, she sobbed, claiming she had no idea how Mauricio could be suspicious of her. Now this is even before investigators thought she was a suspect. Mauricio was already suspect of her. Through her sobs, she claimed, and I quote, "They have played a lot with our minds. Maybe he didn't have enough trust in me because I never doubted him." She even released a statement that no one thinks she necessarily should have said, and that is that she claimed Mauricio's brother, so her brother-in-law, offered her $500,000 to buy a plane ticket and leave the country, to get out of Mexico, to leave. Now, I'm unsure if that was 500,000 American dollars, 500,000 pesos, but I did the math. If it was 500,000 pesos in 2010, that's $25,000 in USD. That would be 25,000 USD dollars. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to tell someone to leave the country. That's enough money to set up your life somewhere else, especially in 2010. So whether it's 25K or 500K, that is odd. That just confirms how much suspicion the family had of her. Now, Lizette, she talked a lot, and she told a reporter about Paulette's wake that her husband did not want to see her at the wake, but she did show up to the burial when he did not. And I quote, "My husband told me he didn't want to see me again. As you can guess, they got divorced." In another interview, she claimed she had no idea how her daughter's body ended up in her bedroom, how she was not in the home when the police discovered Paulette's body, and that she was with a psychologist when she was told that Paulette was found. "It was the last thing I wanted to hear. All I know is that I lost my little angel," she claimed. Lizette also discussed the disability that Paulette had, and she was born with it. It impaired her speech and mobility, mostly on the left side of her body, but she was making good progress with physical therapy. Paulette was now able to climb the stairs in their home, use the bathroom on her own, and she could also feed herself now, which are all great strides because she used to not be able to do any of those things. But it is worth mentioning that Paulette was bruised on her left side, her weaker side, the side that she was most affected by. With Lizette, we need to talk about her close friend, Amanda De La Rosa, and her claims on this case. Now, many people have called Amanda someone who just wants fame, so just take her actions with a grain of salt. Amanda has been accused for years for being an accomplice to Lizette in Paulette's death, with talks if the two were convicted, she would end up with 50 years in prison. She was the witness, the one that signs like the witness certificate at a wedding. You need a witness. That was her at Lizette and Mauricio's wedding. She was also present at that mysterious Los Cabos trip I mentioned earlier, which we actually know very few details about. But according to Amanda, this is something that happened. She claimed that she was actually on that trip. Lizette and her were at the house of a man she called VTP. But it was not Lizette's lover, not an affair partner, not a boyfriend, not an emotional affair, nothing. But they were oddly close. Like, not brother and sister close. They were just close, not best friend close. They were close in a weird way. She told news stations, and I quote, "I don't know what to call him because even though Lizette was fond of him, we didn't know what to call him." Now, the main reason Mexican netizens dislike Amanda De La Rosa is because just 4 months after Paulette's death, she released the book in July of 2010, 2 months after the child was buried. Written and published without the knowledge or permission from Paulette's family, but in it she claims she did not write a single lie, and she was pointing out the errors in the investigation. She wrote it while she was in that apartment, gathering insider knowledge when everyone was looking for the child. She was thinking about herself. She told a local reporter, and I quote, "From the days before Paulette's disappearance, I was writing my diary. Then, as it went along, I was taking notes of everything I saw and heard, and the idea of the book arose a bit so I could give my version, because it was very hard, the amount of things I heard, how they defamed each other, how they used the names of people who had, at least in my case, a clean name." No one asked for her opinion on this case, and in doing so, why? Now, the publication of this book, rightly so, created the final rift between Amanda and Lizette, which she told an interviewer for EU El Universal during promotion for the book, while addressing the claims that she was involved, and I quote, "She told me that she trusted me. What happened was very strong. We both needed a little distance. At the moment, we're at a healthy distance, and there is no argument. I am not sure about anything. I was accused of being involved in a crime." Amanda would also go on to claim that the rumors of her being involved in the crime involved with Paulette's disappearance came from those close to the net. Now, there are a plethora of theories out there on Paulette's, multiple of which I don't have the sources to back up, because there's no concrete evidence to source them. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, it's all over Reddit, but this isn't a conspiracy theory video. This is a video recounting the strange death of a young child who, no matter what, no matter how she was taken too soon. And she had no way to communicate for help. So whether you think she slipped off the bed or if it was murder, she couldn't call for help. At the end of the day, Paulette Gerbara Farrah never truly got the justice she deserved. I'm not here to speculate because in truth this is a 4-year-old child and she deserved a wonderful life. And if she was still with us today, she would be about 17 or 18, graduating from high school, maybe pursuing a college degree. We will never know what she would have chosen what to do with her life, whether that was traveling the world, going to college, starting her own family, starting a business, or even staying in Mexico City. There is a very slim margin of this case ever being reopened because Paulette was cremated in 2017. Her body cannot be exhumed for DNA evidence anymore. But what we can acknowledge and we all can agree on is that this investigation has many inconsistencies. The family had money, and maybe something was a cover-up. There's a difference of just one person being suspicious in a case. But when everyone that is close to the family, the nannies and the investigators and the attorney general all have suspicions and odd things happening around them, there's no denying something is off. You have to acknowledge that Paulette's mom was a lawyer. She knew the law. You have to acknowledge that the family was out of town the weekend before. Mauricio had just gotten home from a business trip the night before. You have to acknowledge that it's odd that someone so close to the case, the best friend, immediately turned on her other friend. And the nanny is no one believes, who spent day in and day out with Paulette. So that is all the information I have on this case. It is a really hard one to discuss. It's been plaguing my mind for years. So let me know your thoughts and opinions on this case. Do you think it was an accident? Do you think someone did it? But like many cases, I do think this one will remain unsolved, even though it was technically solved and as an accidental suffocation. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I have my theories on this case. I don't think it was an accident, but I'm not going to speculate who I think did it. My socials are linked down below if you want to follow me. And as always, as a palate cleanser, to help kind of lighten the mood, as the dogs were here to listen to the case with us, the doggo picture of the day is going to be this picture of Clover, who's actually been sitting with me this whole time down here on the floor, which I appreciate. But yeah, love you, mean kisses, don't think stupid. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!